Andy, sir, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, Brendan. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. We were just talking before we pressed the record button. We were both watching the US Open tennis final last night. Um, yeah, I was just amazed. Like Emma Raducanu, 18 years old, against it's Leila Fernandez, Leila or Lila. I think it's
Yeah,
Leila
yeah.
Fernandez,
Layla, I
a
think. Yeah.
19-year-old Canadian. But it was one of the best finals. I'm a huge tennis fan. Like I would watch most of the Grand Slams, but one of the best finals I've ever seen. And I've two young daughters who are playing tennis. I was thinking if you don't have to look any further than this for inspiration to see these two young women, battling it out last night. It was amazing, amazing. You saw it too, didn't you?
Yeah. I did watch it. Yeah, and I also got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the semi-final. On when was that? Friday morning, I think, early. And she was just incredible. She's just like, I mean, I used to watch tennis a lot when I was younger. Don't watch it as much now, but yeah, just incredible. And her, I don't know, belief, and she just seemed to keep going, and just that, yeah, made very few mistakes, and just yeah, it was incredible. You talk
Yeah.
about your young kids. I've got older kids, and one of them's actually 26 today. Happy birthday, Hannah!
Happy birthday.
And she sent me a couple of messages. She was like, "She's just an incredible woman." So I mean, she's 26 now, my daughter, but still clearly inspired by yeah,
Yeah.
watching Emma Raducanu and what she did, and how she
Yeah.
went
It was.
about it as well, and how she spoke afterwards and everything like that. I mean, just yeah, incredible.
It's incredible, wasn't it? And both of them, I was waiting for
Yeah,
one of them to I was thinking the occasion's going to get the better of them here. It's not going your way. And even, Leila Fernandez in the second set, I thought, she's going to crumble completely here. And she didn't, just the mental strength from both of them at that age.
yeah,
Maybe it's just complete fearlessness as well. But yeah, fair play to both of them.
yeah.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah, it
You're
was an
also,
incredible match. Yeah, I was going to say every time they went to Tim Henman, he was like, "They can't keep the quality up. They can't keep the quality up," but they did. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, it was
yeah,
great.
that was brilliant. You're also an Arsenal fan. I have to throw that in there, Andy. You were at the match yesterday. What are your
that
thoughts
will
on the
probably
season?
that will probably come up a few times. Yeah, I'm a very positive Arsenal fan, so I'm a believer in Mr. Arteta, and I'm patient, and I think it's going to take time. I was watching a Premier League documentary the other day, and about the beginning of the Premier League, and like how Alex Ferguson was like under so much pressure, and United hadn't won for so many games, and like I'm not saying Arteta's going to do that for Arsenal. I'd love it if he did, but I think we need to give him time, and he's clearly trying to achieve something about the culture and all of that. So
Yeah,
yeah, so I was pleased. We got a win. We got 3 points. We scored a goal. So it was a good day.
exactly, exactly. I mean, it could be worse. It could be a long-suffering Newcastle fan like myself, but we'll leave it there, I think. so, so listen, Andy, thanks again for taking the time. You're the head of risk and compliance for MetLife in the UK. So, what I thought we'd start off with maybe is if you could just give an overview of what it is to be the head of risk and compliance, and maybe a day in the life or something like that.
Yeah, so my background is in compliance. So I was head of compliance, and I'd been in the compliance role or done compliance roles for many years. And then in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, that expanded to risk. So what is compliance? I suppose it is hard. It's, well, making sure that as a company you comply with all the rules and legislation in your country, which might sound a bit dull. But I don't find it dull because actually, if you look at what is the purpose, what's behind that, it's basically making sure that you're treating customers fairly, you're doing a good job for your customer. So as a business, you've obviously got commercial needs and you want to drive commercial benefit. But if you do that and the needs of the commercial and the business are above your customer, then that's not sustainable. So it's how can you make sure that you are a successful business and you are putting the customer at the heart of what you do. So that's fundamentally what I do. I mean, there's a big rule book, huge great rule book around how you need to do that and how you go about doing that. But also a lot of it is principle based, and it's just about making sure you're doing the right thing for your customers. So that's the compliance side. The risk side is slightly different. So the risk side is just about making sure that operationally we are aware of potential risks to us as a business and that we're managing those well. I mean, we've just lived through this huge pandemic, which was a risk to a lot of businesses, and we've seen how businesses have suffered. Even going up to the football yesterday, you're walking down the street and you're seeing that business isn't there anymore. That business isn't there anymore. And obviously, the pandemic was a huge risk that none of us could really. Well, you could plan for it, but it was like such a massive event we'd never seen in our lifetime. But yeah, it's just making sure we're aware of those potential risks to us as a business. I think of companies like Blockbuster Video. When I was a kid, you grew up on every street corner, there was a Blockbuster Video, you'd go and hire a video. The technology moves on. I mean, you can't even sell DVDs at a boot fair anymore because no one wants them. So you have to kind of reinvent yourself. You have to keep yourself ahead of the game. You have to make sure that you are aware of what's coming. So that's different. So that's about the risks to you as a business and what you need to do to be aware of those, plan for those, so that you can continue to succeed and thrive as a business.
Yeah. And what skills, what are the key skills, Andy, that you need to be in risk and compliance? What attributes do you think are beneficial?
So it's one of the reasons I love the job is that you're at the center of the business, really. So you're not kind of in one part of the business, you're working across the business. So you've really got to be able to get on with people. You've got to be able to empathize. You've got to be able to see where they're coming from. But you also got to get them to understand what you're trying to achieve as well. But and pretty much everything that I do is common sense. You would want to do. Like the compliance stuff, yes, there's a rule book which says you've got to do all of these things, but 99% of those things are good things to do anyway. There might be the odd thing and you think, it's a bit of a faff. But if you can get people to understand the reasons behind it, then they'll almost naturally do it anyway. Some of the best things I've had, most successful times in my career, and you look back and you sit back and you watch people having conversations like they don't need me here anymore because they get it. So they get what they need to do to make sure they're doing the right thing for the customer or to be aware of those risks. So it's empathy. You've got to work hard. I think modern business life now, maybe like anything, but particularly in compliance, there's a lot to be aware of. We don't have a particularly big team, and you've got to be across all the regulations. Regulations are changing all the time. We have a regulator or two regulators in the UK, and if the head of that regulator changes, then they may bring out lots of new regulation. You've got to be aware of that. So you've got to be able to analyse a lot of information, understand what it's about, and communicate it. So I think communication is absolutely key as well in terms of, yes, that verbal communication, getting on well with people, but we have to, I don't have to analyse 100 pages of a report and communicate it in 2 pages to the senior management so they get it and they understand it and they know why it's important. So be able to speak in their language as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. And I mean, we'll get into it when we dive back into how went your career path and how you progressed. But even before we get into that, is there anything, let's say, if you're just leaving your leaving cert or your, what you call them in the UK when you're getting your final exams?
I didn't do any, but we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that, yeah. Yeah. Would you have any advice as to what you could do nowadays in, university? Is there any particular, degree you would maybe study if this is the path you want to take? Any advice there?
Again, we'll get to it later, but I didn't go to university. I left school at 16. So my daughter's at university doing a law degree now. That's probably a good place to get an understanding of maybe the background and the law and the legislation that sits behind things. So, but I don't really think it's essential. You get into it, then there are professional qualifications. So I did a lot of professional qualifications, and there are professional qualifications which will absolutely stand you in good stead. And I'd sort of grown up, and we'll talk about school and stuff, and I didn't have a great time at school, and I was anti-exams, but then I met somebody who explained to me the benefit in doing those professional qualifications, and that really stood me in good stead because it gave me a really good foundational knowledge of the financial services industry. So that was key because that was relevant. Those qualifications were really relevant to what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into that right now then. I mean, let's go back and talk, where did you grow up? What school did you go to and that stuff?
Yeah, so I live in Kent, in the corner of England, southeast of England. So I grew up here. I've moved about a little bit, but come back. Um, so yeah, I grew up in Kent. Went to primary school. Primary school was fine. I didn't particularly like primary school, but I know what I mean. I was a young boy. I wanted to be playing football and doing stuff like that. So yeah, it was okay. It was different. I'm 50 years old, so some of the teaching methods back then are maybe not as enlightened as they are now, but it was fine. Then I went to secondary school, and I can still remember the day. So we have a thing called, or we had a thing, yeah, we said about it, called the 11 plus. You pass the 11 plus, you go to grammar school. I can remember the day that my dad walked up the stairs. I had bunk beds with my brother. We were both still in bed, and he said, "Great news, you passed your 11 plus." And my heart sank. Um, and my dad just was like, couldn't understand it. Like, why is he not happy? But I knew that meant that I was going to the grammar school that my brothers went to, that I just didn't want to go to. I've been captain of my school football team, incredibly unsuccessful captain of my school football team. I don't think we ever won a game. But I love playing football, and I love that side of it. And that there was a school that I wanted to go to, which has now become a grammar school in Tunbridge Wells in Kent, for tech, local tech college at the time. You needed to pass your 11 plus to go there, or there were other schools that if you hadn't passed your 11 plus, they were going to be much more my kind of thing. But my brothers had gone to the grammar school. The eldest one, David, had loved it and flown. Richard, my next brother, kind of tolerated it. And I came along. And I'd made my mind up that I wasn't going to like it from the start, and I didn't.
And Andy, just for my own note, when you say grammar school, like, first of all, what is that exactly, and why didn't you want to go there? What was it about it you didn't want?
Yeah, so grammar school means you have to pass this thing when you're 11, and then I suppose notionally the cleverer kids you get streamed. So it's quite hard to pass the thing, and once you've passed that, you're in the top kids, and you're going to grammar school. And I went to this grammar school in Tunbridge in Kent, where my brothers had gone to, and it was one of the better grammar schools. But I could get there because my brothers had been there. And I can't remember what they call this 11 plus thing, but it's kind of like rational thinking and things like that. And I was quite good at stuff like that. So I didn't find the 11 plus particularly difficult. I don't remember. But have you seen Dead Poets Society?
Yeah.
Film, schools like that.
Right.
So it was that kind of old fashioned traditional school. Some of the teachers still wore capes and mortarboards, like the thing with a little tassel down. Really discipline, and that wasn't me at the time. I don't know if you're familiar with the program that was on school, Grange, on television, Grange Hill.
I heard of it. I didn't see it, but I know about it. Yeah.
So that was like the antithesis of this school that I went to. I wanted to go to Grange Hill. I didn't want to go to this grammar school that I went to. We played rugby, we did cross country running. It was just very strict, lots of rules that you had to stick to, and if you wavered the other side of the rules, then they would kind of come down on you like a ton of bricks. And yeah, and I wasn't a bad kid. Like I never misbehaved. I don't think I ever had a detention, but I just didn't buy into that. Or I wasn't. So I think I could have been inspired. I could have loved it. I could have been engaged, but that environment didn't do that for me. So I left. So I did it. I stayed and did what were called O levels then. We now have GCSEs. Brendan, you've gone. Are you still there?
No, I'm still here. What you might notice, Andy, is the signal quality will drop, but in the final recording, this will all be much better. So don't worry about it. You can keep going.
Yeah, I just can't see you. That's fine. So it was the last year of what we called O levels. Then they're called GCSEs. I took those. I passed 4 of them, and then I left. So I think there were 120 kids in my year at school, and it was almost unheard of to leave. I think there were 4 or 5 of us that left. And I left, and I went and got a job. Got a job working for NatWest Bank in a branch, and I absolutely loved it. As much as I hated, and hate's a strong word, and I've thought about that and thought, did I really hate that school? And I did really hate that school. As much as I really hated that school, I really loved then going into a work environment at 16 and being treated like an adult. Then yeah, just the environment was completely different.
Can I ask, Andy, just before we move on into kind of when you went into the work world, I mean, that must have been a huge and difficult decision for you to leave. And presumably, when you went in there in the first place, similar to, millions of young kids, you kind of felt destined, you had to kind of go there in the first place, and you did. But can you talk a little bit about how you made that decision to leave? Because that must have been a very tough one.
Yeah, so I think I've always had the sort of courage of my convictions. I was quite a shy kid, um, and certainly had like social anxiety, but there's something in me which was like, no, I'm just not gonna. And I don't know if that came from my dad, because my dad didn't do particularly well at school. My dad's an intelligent bloke. He's like well read. He's done well successfully in business. He was senior in building companies. Then he left and set up his own business, a building company. Then he ran a bookshop for years. And I think that I just thought, well, if he did it and he didn't do well at school, I can do it. And to be fair to my mum and dad, like, even though I had to go to that school, and I think that's something they regret now, but like, it happened, and they never once questioned. I just told them I'm leaving. It's not for me. I think they knew. They realised by that point that it wasn't for me. So, I just had the courage of my convictions. I'm going to go out into the world, and the world of work. I mean, it was different then. Maybe that was easier to do, particularly because at 16 you have to stay in education now or get an apprenticeship, whereas at that time you could go and get a job. But yeah, so maybe one example of that is I remember when I was sitting those O-level exams, two things come to mind. There was one teacher who came up to me while these are my big exams that were sitting up, which I knew they were big and I knew they were important to my future, and I did try and study for them, even though I didn't like the school or particularly that form of education. I remember my physics teacher coming up to me. He was an older guy, he was Welsh, and he said, "Boy," he said, "I can't believe it, you're actually doing some work for once." I was like, that made me laugh. But then another teacher came up to me in a different exam, and I was wearing a jumper and I had a little emblem on it, an Arsenal emblem, because it was 1987. I was doing these exams, and Arsenal centenary was in 1986. So I had this little tiny emblem on my jumper, which was, I don't know, Arsenal 100 years or something. And he called me out on it in my exam and said, "You're coming to my room after the exam. You've got detention." And my blood boiled. I was sitting my exam. This was an important exam for my future, and I knew that. So I was just like, oh, couldn't believe it. So I didn't go and see him afterwards. I went to see the head of the year, I guess essentially maybe his boss, and I said, "This isn't right. I was in the middle of the exam. These are important to me." And to be fair to this guy, he heard me out. He said, "No, let me deal with it." So I think maybe just I had that within me that if I thought something was right or wrong, or I wanted to do something, I was going to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, don't mess with Arsenal. That's the moral of that story.
Yeah, well, it was just I couldn't believe it. It was like, it's an important exam. Like, there were other kids in. If that had been a rugby emblem, I'd have been fine.
Yeah.
But it was a little tiny thing. I mean, if I'd been wearing an Arsenal shirt or, I don't know, an earring or something like that, but little tiny thing, like, what does it matter? It's an important exam. But yeah.
No, that's a good lesson. Like, even, for people listening, it's the whole story there really is to follow your gut and, trust trust your convictions really and follow through on them, being true to yourself. And that's what you did there, even though it was tough,
Yeah, what I believed in, what I believed was right. And that was why I left. I made that decision. I told my mum and dad that I was going to do that, and kind of wasn't really questioned. My eldest brother went on to university and got an award, went to King's in London and got an award for being like one of the best English students they'd had in years. My next brother went on, did A-levels. He didn't go to university, but he left school at 18, got a good job. And then I left school at 16 and went a different route.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as you said, you went into NatWest then for your first job. Yeah.
So I got a job in a branch. And I absolutely loved it. I was a really quite a naive kid because I'd been to this grammar school, all boys. Then I was thrown into the world of work. Thrown in's right, but I went into the world of work. I was 16 years old. the banks at that time, so I think NatWest Bank took something like 5,000 16-year-olds a year, 16, 17-year-olds a year. So I was one of the new intake for that year, and I was working with, men, women, boys, girls, all different ages, and I didn't have to stick my hand up if I wanted to go to the loo. There were no rules. It was just a great time. It was like a new family that I joined. And I remember I didn't want to ever take my annual leave. I just wanted to stay. I wanted to go to work every day because I loved it. I loved being around those people. It was really, I mean, it's amazing. There were 2 computers in the whole branch. I think it's 60, 70 people. So my first job was I would sit there and I'd have to process all the transactions. So the checks, the credits and everything. And you sat in a machine called a terminal with a big reel of paper and you just type stuff in. And you had to go quick. I still, to this day, make quite a few type mistakes when I'm typing because you just had to go so fast to keep up with it. But you could chat with other people, and it was just a lovely environment to be in. I really, really, absolutely loved it. But also things like, so one of my jobs each week was to go on the roof to set the generator running for 20 minutes. So 2 of you had to do that together. I mean, health and safety, you were on the roof of the bank. And this generator was in like this old shed. You'd unlock the shed, you'd pull it out, you set the generator going for 20 minutes, and you just sit up there and have a chat.
Unbelievable.
So it was a different world, maybe, but it was certainly a different world to the school that I'd grown up in, going to, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't particularly at that time necessarily have lots of ambition. I was just enjoying it. I was 16 to 18. And I then what they used to do, they used to transfer you. So I got transferred from that branch to another branch, and they always used to say nothing is ever like your first branch, and it's true. It was amazing, that first branch. Second branch wasn't quite the same, but by that time I'd also met someone. I got a girlfriend, and I then did have this ambition to buy a house. So I got engaged, I think, when I was 20. I got married when I was 21. And I bought my first house when I was, I think, 2 days after my 21st birthday. And I was earning like peanuts. I was earning, I think, £7,000 a year. My wife was earning less. It seems crazy now that you could have bought a house then. House cost £51,500. And the bank were probably a little bit generous in the amount of money they lent me. They might have squeezed the rules a little bit, but they lent me the money to buy the house, and I'd saved all the money up for a deposit and everything. But that had sparked something in me, I think, that I wanted to then go on and achieve to enable me to create a home and an environment.
That was the trigger.
Maybe ultimately what was going to be my family. That was the trigger. And also something else that had happened when I was a kid was my dad, like I said, he was successful in building companies for other people. Then he left and set up his own building company. He did that at a really bad time. I mean, it's hard to think now with property prices just going up and up and up, but there was a property crash. Couldn't sell houses for love nor money, and he built all these houses, and he had money tied up in these houses. I can remember he gave away cars with his houses, holidays, also just to try and get people to buy these houses. But ultimately, it didn't work, and we lost our house because our house had been put up as collateral. So that was, I think, a big event in my formative years as well, that the house that we lived in, which was a nice 4-bed detached house, that had to go to pay the debts.
What age were you then, Andy, when that happened?
I was 14 or 15. And I can still remember, again, these things when you're a kid, like mum and dad invited me down, sat around the dining room table, they explained to me, my brother had got up and walked out before me, and then I was the next one in. It's almost like a redundancy situation at work now, or something like that. It's like, what's going on? To be fair, I just thought they were going to sell me, they were going to split up. I had no reason to think that was going to happen, other than like the odd argument, which families have. But once they told me, no, it wasn't that, it was what it was, I was like, well, we're all going to be together. Yes, we're all going to be together.
That's not so bad.
So it's not so bad. But it still was a big thing that had happened. And so I think it did drive in me something about financial stability and wanting to have a house and all that sort of stuff. So once I then met Debbie, who I then married, and then that didn't work out, but I then wanted to buy a house, and that sparked something in me to maybe want to be ambitious and achieve something.
Yeah. I mean, in today's world, it's crazy, Andy, to think, at the age of 21, you said you were married and you had bought your first house. I mean, it's not unheard of these days, but it's very, very rare.
Yeah, and again, that wasn't something. Again, that was a courage and convictions. We both felt we wanted to get married. We wanted to buy a house. So we didn't. I mean, we went without a lot of things to buy that house, to save the money up, and then to pay the mortgage. So then I left NatWest and I went to work for a company called Pearl Assurance. They were a big insurance company. They're sort of the insurance man that used to knock on your door and collect your money each week. That was the Pearl and the Prudential, with two big companies like that. Industrial branch insurance, they used to call it. So I went and worked there and had this house, and because I moved up country. I moved to the Midlands, a place called Stamford in Lincolnshire, and I worked there for 4 or 5 years. And then once I'd got that house, and then I had to pay the mortgage and things like that, I was ambitious then, and I saw a job posted on the job board, and it was the next grade up from me, and that happened to be a compliance job. I didn't really know it was a compliance job, and that's when I first got into compliance. So I would have been then 24, 25. And I met somebody then. Sorry, go on, Brendan.
Sorry, Andy, just that switch. So before you went for that compliance role, which you hadn't done before, I mean, what were you doing in the branches? Was it just general?
Yeah, back
activities?
Office stuff. So processing checks, stuff like that. But then I went to be on the counter, so serving customers. And I mentioned I was shy and I had social anxiety. It was the first job that really I struggled with a bit, because then you'd have people walking up to you at a big glass thing between you and them. And you had to try and have a conversation with them. And I found that difficult. That brought out that social anxiety, that lack of confidence a bit in having that conversation through that big sheet of glass and everyone's around you. And so I actually didn't enjoy that as much. I much preferred being sort of one of the gang at the back in the machine room, as we called it. But yeah, did that. Then so I did that in a couple of different branches. Then I got offered potentially a transfer, because I decided to move, because my wife's parents had moved further up country and we were wanted to move up there. We'd seen a place which we liked, and house prices were much more affordable there. I wouldn't have been able to afford the house that in the southeast of England that I bought up there. But that transfer fell through, so I went and got a job at Pearl. I'm doing sort of administrative stuff, processing new business forms, standing orders, processing standing orders. Everything was very manual back those days. So, but again, in a similar environment, working with other people, which was good. But by then, I want to get on. So I saw this job posted. I went for it. I got it, and I met this guy called John Hercock. I was thinking about this the other day. There's kind of 3 Johns have been involved in my career, being inspirational features and figures, and he was one. And he was the one that got me to take exams. He made me realise the importance, how relevant they were going to be, how it would help me to get ahead. At that time, it was maybe unusual to take those exams. So I took them at a young age, and I still found it hard. Studying isn't something that comes naturally to me. If it said in the book, it's going to take you 60 hours to study, it would take me 300.
Right.
But he also instilled in me, don't fail any of them. Don't take them till you're ready. And I did one every 3 months. And then I did the more advanced ones. They took 6 months. But I did them all, passed them all. Got something which was then called the Financial Planning Certificate. Then I got the Advanced Financial Planning Certificate. That gave me that background knowledge to really understand financial services, insurance, pensions, all that sort of stuff, which did gave me the knowledge to be able to do a better job, and ally that with those skills, those people skills, maybe that emotional intelligence, which was something that I'd never heard of as a kid. That put those 2 things together, and I think that's what really helped me. So I did that job. I then got promoted to another job, which was like a technical job, and I went from dealing with people to like having to read stuff and understand, and it was really quite technical. I really didn't like that. But yeah, fast forwarding, because it will take ages if I go through in detail the
Yeah,
whole sort of
before you fast
bit.
forward, Andy, did you know then at that point when you joined Pearl and you got that compliance job that this is what you really enjoyed? Was there something in there that triggered like, yeah, this is what I'm going to stay in, or was it more organic than that? You know, it was just another step to see.
More organic than that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
I enjoyed the environment. I enjoyed the work environment. I enjoyed being around people. Um, and I guess it was the compliance thing. So once I got that job, we were auditing. We were auditing people's sales who'd never been audited. And in those days, you could literally be, I don't know, a milkman on a Friday, and you could be a financial advisor the following Monday.
right,
And you were auditing what they were selling. And these were people who didn't like being audited. Um, so that took a certain skill again to empathize with them and to get on with them, not to see them as, not to be them and us, because
yeah,
there was this was the first time this had ever happened. We were going in. The regulator then was a regulator called Lautro. I can still remember they issued this bulletin, EB20, about how you needed to audit the quality of sales because, to be honest, sales were commission led. People were making sales, a lot of sales to earn commission. They weren't necessarily the best thing for the end customer. And that was our job, to go into what was a bit like a lion's den and start auditing these things where people weren't used to that
yeah,
and didn't like it. And again, that bit I mentioned at the beginning about commercial customer, some of the things then commercials up here and customers down here, and we were there on behalf of the customer trying to redress that balance.
yeah. And that's really, and that as well is where you learned the importance of emotional intelligence, as you referred to there. It's in those kind of situations. And it also looks like you learned, and it's that self-awareness as well. And I spoke about it on another podcast. You know, you won't always make the right career decisions. You know, you'll end up doing something, you know, you're not a big fan of, but that's still a great experience because you learn what you're not a big fan of. So you learned, for example, you didn't like that technical head stuck in a book piece
Yeah,
away from people. And it's all those little triggers. It's being aware of what you like and don't like helps you in that organic next step. Because you mightn't be consciously
yeah,
saying, you know, I'm going in this direction, but you're doing it because you know the other direction is something you've experienced and it's not been something you liked.
yeah. I heard something once. I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody who'd been very successful in business, and they were asked a question like, "How did you get here?" And they went, "Good decisions." So how do you make good decisions? Is it experience? So how do you get experience? Bad decisions. And
Yeah,
it's that process of like, well, oh, I didn't like that. That didn't go well. Or yeah, so through those, I've made loads of mistakes along the way. But yeah, you learn
yeah,
from those, and that kind of makes you what you are. And it's learning once you get older, and you know, looking back, it's fine to make those mistakes. It's fine to not know. Um, and actually, it's fine to be anxious. It's fine to be shy. It's fine to be scared because we all experience those emotions, and those are the normal emotions of being a human being. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just whizzing through. So from there, this guy John, he left, went to work somewhere else in London. Me and my wife were getting itchy feet about moving back down south, so I came to work for him. He offered me a job down in London, company car, only a slightly better salary, but he put an incentive in for everyone I part-time I passed another one of those exams, I get some more money. So yeah, I came to work in London for him, doing a similar job, but in a broker this time. So rather than in an insurance company, in a broking environment. So the advisors who were selling the products, if you like, rather than ones who were manufacturing them. And I learned a lot from him in terms of his courage of his convictions as well. He had huge courage of convictions about doing the right thing. He also had a really good sense of humour, so he would put things across in a humorous way. He maybe more than me had a bit of a distrust of the people who were selling the stuff, and there's a little bit more. So I learned a lot from him about how to do things. I also learned about maybe how I'd want to do them differently. We had I spoke to him literally Friday. He's 77 years old now. We still keep in touch, and we still laugh about things. About I learned from him certain things, but I learned from him that things that I would want to do differently. And yeah, so that worked well. But I guess one of the fundamental big things that changed there was the managing director of that company was also another guy called John Crisford. He came and saw me do a couple of presentations. Used to run presentations and workshops. He came and watched me do that. He'd come in. He was the like MD of the bigger business, and within that bigger business was the bit of the business that I worked for. So he was the big insurance bit, but he was also the chairman of the bit that I worked in. And he called me up to his office one day. In those days, it was the big old executive floor, sofas. It's like being in a hotel on his floor. It's a completely different world. I'd only been up there, I think, once before. I got the call, and I can still get the feeling that I got. It's like, oh my goodness, that nerves and anxiety, catching the lift up to the 4th or 5th floor, walking out. And he said, I've been impressed with what you're doing, and I would like you to join the board. I was 28 at this time. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't even know what that means. I had no idea. I couldn't have mobile phones. I couldn't quickly Google it. Google didn't exist at that time. And then what he said to me, he says, you know that man you work for, he now works for you. And I said,
Wow.
Okay. I said, well, what do I do now then? He went, well, just keep doing what you're doing, keep doing it the way you're doing, you'll be fine. And then I got the lift back down to the ground floor and walked out. And this guy, the other John, who'd given me the job and who believed in me, all of a sudden I'd become his boss.
How did you deal with that? I mean, that's a tricky situation right there.
That was a very tricky situation. And I mean, I spoke to him on Friday. We're still friends. We still talk. I think it was more difficult for him. Well, it was difficult for both of us, but it was difficult for him. But I mean, ultimately, this kid that he believed in had gone on and achieved, I guess, that, or got that role that he believed that I could get. But I think it was tricky for him because it was either me or him who were going to get that job to become the board director. And this other guy, John, had seen in me something that he thought, I think he can do it. He's that young kid who's going to do it, and he might have a few rough edges. He's going to make mistakes. So, so it was tricky. Ultimately, the John that gave me the job in the first place, he stuck around for maybe 6 months, a year, and then he left, went to work somewhere else. But also, I knew the lady that ran our training department. So actually, I think on the way from the 4th floor down to the ground floor, I stopped off at the 2nd floor at the head of training and said, I've just been told this. Can you get me on a management course quick? And I did go on that course, and the course was great. And it really helped me in terms of, starting that journey of becoming a manager, treating people the way that you would hope to be treated. And I learned a lot. And I've learned a lot over the years of managing people. And that's something I really, really enjoy.
And so where did you go from there? So how long did you stay in that role?
So I stayed in that role. So I was something called a training and competence officer when I got that job. So I was responsible for the company's training and competence scheme. So how people were trained to make sure that we met the rules in the right way. And then I became the director. So I stayed there, and the company grew and the job grew because it was a very acquisitive company. So it changed name a few times as it got bigger and bigger. There was a thing called a pension mis-selling review where all the pensions that were sold in the UK, people transferred their pensions. That's another long story, but basically it was a big project to review all of those sales. And I was given that to do. So when I became that director, I had 4 or 5 people working for me. When I became responsible for that pension mis-selling project, I had about 50 people reporting to me. Again, I was, 30, something like that. And I took over the project when it was really behind. And we just had the regulator come in and say, you've got to sort it out. And again, that gave me a weird opportunity to get involved and to run that project. The regulator came back about a year later, couldn't find anything wrong. We'd done it all. And I can even remember saying to the regulator, this lady's name was Sarah, and I said, look, all these people have done all this stuff. You can't find anything wrong. Can you say anything nice? And she said, Andy, that isn't the way it works. No, that's not the way it works. We only tell you if we find things wrong. So, okay, fair enough. But I'm going to go downstairs now and tell everybody what a great job they've done. So I did that job. but then things happen, and what you realise in your career is people move on. So this other guy, John Chrisford, he moved on. Somebody else came in. I did another big project. That project came to an end. A new managing director came in. My face didn't really fit. So I went, like, things go in sort of, I don't know, you go through periods, and maybe I had a couple of years, a few years of the wilderness years, really, where just this new guy came in. He didn't particularly believe in me. The guy before really believed in me, who gave me that job. So I would have gone through brick walls for him. This guy came in. I can remember my first or second performance review with him, and he said to me two phrases which have always stuck in my mind. He said to me, "Your tattoos colour my judgment of you." Right.
Really?
I've got 3 tattoos. The only reason he knows I've got 3 tattoos was he went on a golf day, a work golf day with me, and he saw when I got changed for golf that I got tattoos. You can't see my tattoos. One on my back, one on my arm, one on my chest. Your tattoos colour my judgment of you. And he said, "You wear fashion suits." And I said, "What do you mean I wear fashion suits?" He said, "You need to wear sensible business suits. You wear fashion suits." I bought suits from Ben Sherman because I'm quite small and they fitted, right?
Yeah.
They were not really fashion suits. I didn't think they were fashion suits. And he went, "You're not good enough to wear suits like that. You're not good enough to be different. You just have to kind of," I was like, whoa. So, yeah.
That was a strange conversation. Yeah.
Strange conversation. I had a few years of working for him. And then, so yeah, I felt a bit disillusioned. Got my mojo
That's
back
interesting,
a little
Andy.
bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think everyone has those moments. It's good to draw that out, because as people change, perceptions on a whole host of different things will change depending who you're dealing with throughout your career. And there will always be those kind of ups and downs for everybody. People should be prepared for that for sure. But when you hit that sort of dynamic, how did you move on from it? How, like, obviously initially it's not a good feeling to have.
No, it's not a good feeling to have. So I guess by this time I was earning substantially more money, and so I was more comfortable. As money had increased, as roles had increased, and I did lots of different roles within that company, like responsible for this and responsible for that, until I hit this point and this guy took over, and it didn't work out for us. So yeah, going to work really was a drag, and maybe we'll talk about it a bit later, but like my mental health suffered. I experienced quite a period of depression. Personal life wasn't going particularly great at that time. I'd divorced and remarried, and things weren't really working out there. I had kids, and the kids were great, but yeah, it was a difficult time for me personally. If I looking back on it, it was definitely a period where I experienced depression.
Yeah.
I had a life coach. The life coach was helpful. She did a great job, but she was famous for really she'd written lots of books, and the way I described that was she was a bit like if I was Muhammad Ali, she was a bit like my Angelo Dundee in the corner. She would make me feel 10 foot tall, where I'd go out and I'd do the fighting in the round, and then I'd go back to the corner and she'd build me back up again. So I used to speak to her once a week, but like every week she needed to build me back up again. I needed to be built back up again. And some of it sustained, but without her being there, it was difficult. So yeah, what changed was this guy didn't last really. So he left. Somebody else came in who believed in me a bit more, but then that company got taken over by another company. I'd been through a number of these companies taken over, 2 people doing the same job. I'd got the job, but this time the company that took us over, a US company, all the layer of management that I was in were made redundant, and I left. And I was actually reached the point where I was like, do you know what? I need that. I need to go. It's the right thing, probably for them. It's the right thing for me. And I decided actually to take some time out. So I took about 8-9 months out. I had my redundancy. I'd now got divorced. I was getting divorced. So the depression and stuff was still there, but I discovered mindfulness. Mindfulness became a huge part of my life. I've been practicing mindfulness now for nearly 15 years, and I teach it at my current job as well. So that had really helped me. Had some time out. I went traveling. I went to Asia, did Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Then, yeah, just took some time out, decided to have a break. I've been working since I was 16. So I was, I don't know, 40, 42, something like that by this point. And then I saw the job that I'm doing now, or similar. So I now work for MetLife, as you say, got a job for them. I took a step back. I'd been head of compliance at this place by the time I left, compliance director, variations of that. Took a step back, did a smaller job, had no team, it was just me, worked for a tiny part of MetLife. Then the head of compliance, who I worked for, left MetLife, and I went for that job, and I got it. So then I was back at that level again. But what I would just say maybe is I'd had a bit of imposter syndrome because I got that job so early. So it's not always black and white. I had the courage of convictions, I had self-belief, but you also had a bit of imposter syndrome going on. So I got this new job and it's like, whoa, can I do it in a different company? I've only ever done it in the one company. So that was there for a little while. I think what comes with the empathy and the getting people is when you're put in a new environment with a whole load of people that you don't know, I can find that difficult because I've not worked out yet. That motivates that person. That's what they like. And that emotional intelligence of being able to get on with people and that will motivate that person and influence them to do, not calculated, but just naturally getting to know someone. I can have a bit of a laugh with them. They're more formal. When it's just a sea of new faces, I found that quite tricky.
It takes time to when you go into any job to navigate that side of things. That's the most difficult part, and trying to understand how others perceive you as well, and having that awareness to try to understand, well, that person might see me this way. Do I need to course correct that, or have they understood me correctly? I think there's a lot of that happens. But just to talk, and that career break, that's very interesting. I mean, is that something you would recommend to people in general terms? I mean, did that press the reset button for you? Was that one of the best decisions you made?
Yes. So people were worried for me because people were going, well, where's your next job? If you land your next job, I'm like, no, I'm just going to take some time out. I'll find another job at some point. I'd been there a long time, so I had enough money to probably tide me over for a year if I needed it. But I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to go to do this. I only went for 3 or 4 weeks traveling around Asia. I'm going to go and do that. And then I'm just going to have a rest. I played golf, so I joined the golf club. And I did just have a break. And it was brilliant because I've been working I don't know how many years it was, 25 years without only just like 4 or 5 weeks holiday a year. So yeah, it really was good. What was difficult about going back into the job environment then was because you have taken a break. You've got perspective. You've seen that it's not all about work. I've done a lot of meditation retreats. Got to think about the bigger picture of like life, what it means, and all of that sort of stuff. Then you go back into a work environment where you can get quite detailed and like into small stuff really. And I was like, well, hold on a minute, do I really want to get back into this? But I needed to earn. I needed to earn a living, and I'd looked at getting a job working in a charity and things like that. But I would have had to start again at the bottom. I had commitments because I've got kids by this time. I've got a mortgage. So, yeah, I did look at alternative options. And in the end, it did become a full-time job looking for a job. So it took me, to describe it as it's like fishing. You had to keep fishing. You had to keep putting your rod in the pool. And some days you got nothing. In fact, some weeks you got nothing, not even a sniff. But then in the end, I did get that job, which then led to this opportunity again. Took the step back, but was able to take the step up again, maybe once people had seen what I was capable of and what I could do. And got this role. And again, it's a great company to work for. I was head of compliance, then that became head of risk and compliance. I did a year's recently where I was covered head of risk in France. So I got that opportunity, which was brilliant until the pandemic hit because I was going out to Paris 2 or 3 times a month. Was really looking forward to Paris in the summer, but that didn't happen because I had to end up doing that job from this room remotely. But that was great, getting to know some different people, different culture. So yeah, lots of different things of opportunities have arisen, but the motivation has become different now because the motivation is now more about helping people,
Mm.
making a difference, and being challenged. I still want to learn new stuff every day. I still want to learn something new, and you can't do the same thing day in, day out. I think you have to
Yeah.
sort of continually be challenged to learn new stuff, to meet new people. So for me, it's really now about just trying to make as much of a difference as I can to the people that I work with and to the business that I work for.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me as well, Andy. And a couple of things I want to touch on as well. I mean, you said something there when you took the career break that I think is important for, especially maybe any young listeners, all two of them probably. But you know, when taking a career break is great, but you mentioned, you tried to pivot maybe into charities and stuff like that, and it does become harder the more experienced you get in one field or the older you get, and people should be aware of that. Oftentimes when we're young, you think you can take what any direction you want whenever you want, that it'll all work out, and that's true, you can, but it does become much harder as you get older, and maybe you have a partner and you have a mortgage and you might have kids, or you could have any other number of different things that you're that are dependent on you. And so if you want to shift to something else, you would have to go to the bottom, or certainly take a dip down to go back up again. So I think that was a very important point you made. And you also mentioned wellness, which is something I'm very late to the party on, but something I'm very passionate about, especially over the last maybe 2.5 3 years. I'm only beginning to see the importance of that now, whereas people like yourself have been way ahead of the curve maybe on a lot of this for years and years. And I had the pleasure of joining one of your sessions in MetLife as well, which I found fantastic. And you do a lot of good stuff in that space. But is there any advice you could give to listeners in terms of mindfulness and wellness and the importance of it, and what maybe they could start doing if they haven't done maybe anything to date?
Yeah. So, I mean, mindfulness changed my life, really. Probably saved my life. And it's, yeah. So, in terms of advice, I mean, maybe if I just mention a couple of things that it can do. But it's all experiential. So you don't have to believe anyone. You don't have to take anyone's word for it. You just go try it. So I read about it to understand about it, but and that really helped. But one of the analogies I have sometimes use is, imagine if David Beckham had only ever read about how to take free kicks, and I've gone, right, I really get it. I really understand the concept. I'm going to go out now at Wembley and take free kicks, and I'll be fine. You've got to practice, and you've got to practice, and you practice and practice. And we were chatting before we came on about Ronaldo, somebody who has just dedicated his life to his craft. For me, is he as talented as Messi? Probably not. Like, Messi's just got this amazing gift, but Ronaldo has just worked and worked and worked. So for me, I had to practice, and sometimes practice waned, and sometimes I did it more. I now meditate every day for 20-30 minutes. I've got the meditation set up behind me there in the corner of my office, and every day I will start with sometimes 45 minutes, but sometimes 5-10 minutes. And it's helped me to really just relax and see things differently and realize that I'm a human being. It's okay to experience anxiety, to be scared of things and all that. Just change the relationship to a lot of the things that held me back when I was younger, where I thought I was not good enough. So I've oddly now got this confidence that I never used to have, but it's a completely different type of confidence. It's not a confidence that, well, I'm unbreakable, I'm amazing, which is what I thought confidence was. It's a confidence to know I'm human. So human is fine. It's human to, before I did this, you feel a bit nervous and what am I going to say? And I shouldn't have stayed up so late last night. I've got bags under my eyes. And so that inner critic voice, but I've changed my relationship to it. It's just, hello, inner critic. It's like, he's okay now. He's my friend. Whereas he kind of had that hold over me for most of my life until I discovered it. But what mindfulness is, so you could use Headspace, Calm, find something on YouTube. It doesn't really matter, but it's just that practice, that regular practice. And ultimately, I learned to see my thoughts as thoughts. I learned not to believe them, not to buy into them. And the more I practiced, just the more I was able to do that. So I will still get those thoughts come into my head, those shoulds, like you shouldn't have stayed up and watched the tennis and then watched Match of the Day, so gone to bed at 12:30 before you promised Brendan you'd do this podcast the next day. But rather than then buying into that thought and going all the way down that road, and then that, I could see, oh, yeah, that's just a thought. Yeah, maybe I could have gone to bed earlier rather than should. So could is a much kinder version of should. But it stops there. So it doesn't go on to the next thing. So it's enabled me to live in the present. You're talking again, let's go full circle back to Emma Raducanu. What she kept saying, each point at a time, being in the moment. I read something somewhere once, Tiger Woods apparently had this imaginary line, I think 6 feet in front of the ball after he played the shot, and then 6 feet in front of the ball when he got to the next shot. Between those 2 points, all he did was concentrate on his footsteps. Felt the feeling of his feet on the floor. The shot had gone, and the next shot would only come into his reality when he got within 6 feet of that next ball. So it's just that being in the present moment.
No,
it takes
good.
a lot of practice.
Yeah, and I mean, you were very honest there, and in sharing that you maybe struggled with depression at that time as well. And I think that's such an important thing as well, because I know a couple of people who have struggled as well, and it doesn't manifest itself very clearly. You don't, well, certainly as a friend, you mightn't recognize these things, but it comes back to kind of emotional intelligence, I think, for people as they enter the workplace as well. It's to just be aware that you don't know what's going on, I think, oftentimes in people's personal lives, and it's to have that tolerance and patience. 15 seconds doesn't define somebody for a lifetime, which I think can often happen, unfortunately. And it's just to be mindful of other people and what's going on with them as well, I think is important. Have you any comment on maybe is there any signs, Andy, or triggers that how that can manifest itself, or what people could be aware of?
I think it is really hard because I didn't let anybody know. It wasn't such an open time when I was going through it. So like even those people who'd really believed in me, and I just didn't feel comfortable talking to them about it because I didn't want to admit it to myself. So, and actually work for me was my safe place. Work was where I felt good. I felt like I was good, but put me in a social situation, put me in the Christmas party, I absolutely hated it, because then it was like, I know, again, I'm going way back years. There used to be a impressionist called Mike Yarwood who did all these impressions. And at the end of the show, he would go, "And this is me." And he would sing a song, which, to be honest, was normally pretty awful. It wasn't as good as his impressions. But I used to feel that "and this is me" moment, me was nowhere near good enough. But me, the Andy at work, doing the job, I was good at that. But me, when that facade went and it was just me, I felt I was totally inadequate. But I didn't really let anybody know that. I just had this guard up. I just pretended. Until I probably got to rock bottom, and then I realised I've got to do something about this. So I did go and see a therapist, Buddhist psychotherapist, because I was into all the mindfulness stuff, and I wanted to see somebody who could bring the two sides together. And then I read a book about the mindful way through depression, which was a real aha moment. Lots of things in there that made me realise, again, I was just human. And as human beings, we've evolved to survive, not to be happy. Like if our ancestors hadn't been anxious about being eaten or chased or whatever, we'd all be dead. So we have this nervous system that's in us, which is built to make us feel that way because we're under threat. But it was being triggered in situations where I wasn't really under threat, but it's the same wiring from all those years ago when we were under threat. And the more I understood that, and then I put that together with the practice, then I was able to do it. So I know I've not really answered your question about spotting things in other people. I've been asked that question a number of times. I think all you can do is be there for people, to just listen. And the more that people know you're there for them, to listen, and you're not going to judge them, then maybe people feel more okay about opening up. And I've had that with some of the talks that I've done at MetLife, where actually I've been open as well about my experiences, and I've had people contact me from literally all over the world, sending me messages, emails. Then we've set up Teams conversations. They've been open with me and then shared stuff with me, and they've said, "Thank you so much because you made me feel it was okay." So maybe it is just about that being open and just having the time to be there for people.
Yeah, brilliant advice, Andy. And you mentioned a book, Andy. Can you say that again? The name of the book you thought was very, very helpful.
So there's The Mindful Way Through Depression, I think it's called. One of the authors, now I'm going to forget, John Kabat-Zinn is one of the authors, and a guy called Professor Mark Williams. I've seen him speak. He does a really good talk on mindfulness. Professor Mark Williams, The School of Life. Is a really good. I went to that talk and it's on YouTube. A really great sort of talk about mindfulness and what it is.
Okay.
But yeah, I would certainly recommend that book. I'd recommend any of the apps. I use Headspace. There's another app that's completely free, Plum Village, which is a Buddhist meditation retreat center, but they're mindfulness meditations. So yeah, anything like that. And I would highly recommend.
Good. I always finish up, Andy, by asking if you could meet your younger self, let's say 16 to 18, what advice or would you give him? What would you tell him if you had half an hour? Not that you're going to speak half an hour now, but
Don't worry, Brendan. I probably could, but I won't.
Oh, do.
No. Just not to be so hard on yourself. But I think you have to learn that. But yeah, it'll be okay, and it really is just completely natural to feel some of these things that you're feeling. To feel scared, as I said, to feel anxious, and just really just to be okay with being yourself and who you are, and you're fine as you are. There's no bar you have to hit. I had this imaginary bar in my head. So some days I felt great because in my head I'd met up with my expectation of myself. I'd never felt good looking enough. I never felt funny enough. I wasn't tall enough. All these things don't matter. Like what matters, I think, is just about being there for people, and whenever I depart this mortal coil or whatever, and they put me in my wooden box, all you want to do is that you've been there for people, really, and that you've been kind, really, rather than necessarily I don't know, achieved a lot, or I've done this or done that. Yeah, I have done quite well, and that's something that I've enjoyed, and I've enjoyed that career, and I still am enjoying it, and I still am motivated every day and every week to be as good as I can be, and my team, for the team that I run, for us to do the best job that we can. But really, I just want to be kind and make a difference, and those are the things that are important. So to get back to your question, then if you do that, then you're doing well.
Brilliant. Yeah, be kind. I love it. Andy, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you very much for your openness and honesty. And I hope many people will get something from it. So thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks, Brendan. See you soon, mate.
Good evening, Andy. Good to see you again.
Good evening, Brendan. Good to see you too.
Yeah, we had a great conversation on Sunday morning, and after that conversation, your inner critic kicked in, and you mentioned there was a couple of things you'd like to spend a few minutes addressing. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me back on. So yeah, you were right. So basically, we spoke Sunday morning, and then not long after, I was cutting the grass and reflecting on our conversation. And I think I mentioned in our conversation, I'm sure I did mention in our conversation about my inner critic, how I've changed relationship to that. I talked about could being much kinder than should, but still should can pop up in your head. And I noticed that should kept, more I reflected on the conversation, things that came in my mind. This is a career-based podcast, and there was a couple of things that I thought were really important that I hadn't mentioned, or maybe I hadn't emphasized enough. I think one of them particularly I hadn't mentioned at all. So I just contacted you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. So those two things are really, first thing I would say is about authenticity. So I think it's really important, if there is anybody who's at the beginning of their career or thinking about a career watching this, I would say it's really important to be yourself, to bring your personality to whatever it is you're doing. Yes, you can look at other people and think, well, I like the way they do it, and I'm not so sure about the way they do it. But I think it's really important that you just bring yourself to it, because people will know, and people will just get that authenticity. There's a guy I like who some people may know, may not know. He's a gardener. He's a bit on garden as well sometimes. A guy called Adam Frost, and he just is who he is. He doesn't try to be anything else. I've met him a couple of times. I did a gardening course with him this year, and he's just truly authentic, and I love him because of that. So I think it's really important that you just bring yourself and you bring your personality to it. Yes, I think it's really important to take feedback on and be open to feedback. And I've had lots of feedback over the course of my career, and I've got better at listening to it. I think you need to choose what you take on, reflect on it for a while. I know early on in my career I'd be quite defensive and like, no, I don't agree with that. I've got better at listening to stuff. I don't necessarily take it all on. I didn't take on what the guy said about my tattoos and my fashion suits. I reflected on that and thought that's more about him than it is about me, so I let that one go. But yeah, I think it's important to really be authentic. The second thing I wanted to say is I think, which is critically important, is you have to find your passion in what you do. So yes, for me, I talked earlier on when we spoke on Sunday about, for a while, my purpose became about, I got engaged, I was getting married, I wanted to buy a house. And that was a really strong purpose. That can't be your only purpose for too long. There's not enough there isn't longevity in that. So I talked about that job that I did at Pearl, the technical job. That was a higher grade. It paid me more money. So it did a better job of paying my mortgage, but it didn't do a very good a job of making me happy because it didn't float my boat. It didn't play to my skill set. So I think you have to find something that you enjoy doing and you can see the passion in. So the passion for me has been in things like making sure we're doing the right thing for customers. Like that really is a passion for me. That's something I feel strongly about. Being a manager of a team, helping to develop those people in the team. And in the risk side of what I do, it's about helping to manage the business so that it's still here, it's still existing, it's still thriving. All of those things are things that I feel passionate about. So probably if you asked a lot of people who work in industry, things like that, what their ideal job would be, it may not be what they're doing. But I really love my job because I really love those things that I can find passionate about. If I could do anything, I'd probably teach mindfulness for a living. However, there's a lot about my job that I love and I'm passionate about, and it's really important to do that. Doing it just to earn money, pay the mortgage, pay the bills. There's been times in my career when it's been like that, and it's been an absolute struggle. So I think it's really important to find your passion in what you do. So those were the two things advice. I really just wanted to mention. So.
Yeah, no, thanks, Andy. And to be fair, I think both those things, whereas maybe you didn't emphasize them on Sunday, I think they both came through very clearly in the conversation we had and the words you spoke to on Sunday. And I really like that authenticity piece and bring yourself to work, because what people need to realize is if you don't, that's going to weigh very, very heavily, because if you're not being yourself, you're acting and you're pretending to be somebody else in work. And that's not something that's going to last indefinitely. You won't be able to do that. So, it's better to be yourself day one. Yeah.
100%. Because people will see through it, but also it's not as rewarding. It's not like, if you can just be yourself, then it's a lot more enjoyable and you'll connect a lot better with people, I think. And if we're honest, probably the people that we relate to the most are those people who you can just sense they're being themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you, Andy. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
And
you're welcome.
We'll chat again soon. Thank you.